Hi, my name is Nora Gelprin. I'm the Director of Sexuality Education and Training at Advocates for Youth. Thanks for joining me as we review student centered learning. So, let's start with some basic definitions about what student centered learning really means. We know that at the core of it, it's focusing on what students need versus what teachers need. We also know it generally involves a variety of instructional strategies since each of our learners learns a little bit differently. Sometimes people call it personalized learning, although I have found districts across the country have different language when referring to the same concept. And many times I find teachers really utilize the theory of multiple intelligences when they're trying to figure out how to create instructional strategies that are most student centered. So let's really review that one in particular. The theory of multiple intelligences was created by Howard Gardner, a professor at Harvard University. It's been around for many, many years. So I'm guessing this may be a review for many of you and new for others. So, just real quickly, the idea is that we all, as human beings, engage with information in a whole variety of ways. There's generally considered 8 different intelligences. Some of us are stronger in some of them than in others, but we all have the capacity to learn in all of these different ways. So let me just quickly review with you what the different intelligences are now. And I understand that they're adding new intelligences all the time. So stay tuned as this theory continues to evolve. First and foremost, many people are familiar with the linguistic intelligence, or really the idea of being word smart, really connecting with words and poetry and journaling as a way to engage with information. There's also logical mathematical, people who enjoy puzzles, people who really find that a logical or sequential way to access information is what really resonates and connects with them. For those 2 types of intelligences, here are some different ways, different kinds of teaching strategies that may be most helpful. I'll just click through these rather quickly, but you'll see in the linguistic intelligence, there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of language in terms of interview, poetry, humor, teaching others, and obviously class discussions. We know on the logical mathematical side, a lot of the typical kinds of things you would imagine: statistics, sequencing, puzzles, timelines, following recipes, those kinds of things. So, if we were to think about how best in sexuality education to use these 2 intelligences, here are some ideas that might come to mind. When we're talking about the linguistic side, it might be an interview, it might be a journal, it might be a debate. When we're thinking about logical mathematical, it might be creating a timeline, plotting when they want to become a parent, if they want to become a parent, versus when they think they might need contraception. It might be conducting a survey or some type of analyzing information. So, those are just some ways that the linguistic and logical mathematical intelligences may play out in sexuality education. Let's look at a couple more. Next up is naturalist, which is one I think fewer people have heard of or are familiar with, but certainly true for some of our students, as well as visual spatial. That's for folks that really resonate with images and diagrams. So let's look at what teaching activities are best for those 2 types of intelligences. For the naturalist, you might be collecting information and categorizing it. You might be doing experiments. You might be going out into the physical environment if possible, opening windows so just you can have some access to natural sunlight. Might be adapting materials to create a new use for them, labeling and classifying as well. And then in visual spatial, the idea of illustrating information, creating films, maybe maps, cartooning is often one that people do as well, designing posters, graphs, charts, all those kinds of things that really connect with someone with a visual spatial strength around one of their intelligences. Now, again, how does this apply to sexuality education? Well, you'll see in the naturalist, it's really might be a field trip. It might be looking at different textures and materials for condoms. For visual and spatial, it might be creating a collage. It might be making a film, or it might be a map about how to get to the closest sexual health service. Let's go ahead and review bodily kinesthetic. This is one that many of us connect to as a strength I find often with PE teachers. We know this is someone that really learns best through doing, and different from that is the musical intelligence, someone who might always have a song in their head or might really connect with lyrics and rhythm and tone and tempo. So, for these folks, these are some examples of the most effective teaching strategies for someone. Let's start with bodily kinesthetic. A lot of these are going to resonate for folks and make sense about how that movement is really going to engage them in their best learning. And then the musical one, in addition to just playing music during your lessons or while people are discussing or doing a task, there's also different ways that you can use the musical intelligence as a way to leverage best practice around sexuality education. So, what would this look like if we're teaching STDs or relationships or puberty? Here are some different ideas for bodily kinesthetic. Many of these I'm guessing you do already. And then what about musical? That's a little bit different. So, creating a jingle, using lyrics of songs, again, playing music while students are working on a task can be a really simple way to get that done. And the last two intelligences sometimes are mixed up. So, interpersonal, this is when people really connect with talking with others. And different from that is intrapersonal, or kind of that self reflection, looking inside, a time to really reflect and think through for yourself what your beliefs and opinions are. So, an interpersonal learner might really find small group tasks are really very effective for them, a role play situation, figuring out a survey or an interview for themselves or others. And then an intrapersonal learner may really find that reflecting through a journal, thinking about visualizing or reviewing their experiences, or thinking about some STEM sentences. How would it feel to do something in the future or make a plan for the future? So, when connecting to sexuality education, here are some techniques that can work for these two types of learners. I'm guessing many of us use small group scenarios, have students line up and in a small group to do a competition on condom lineups, using refusal lines as a way to do that with some small group discussion. Intrapersonal learners can be a little more challenging, but there's lots of easy techniques we can use. Playing a video and figuring out how a character felt, having students imagine themselves a few years down the road, or creating a role play and trying to be insightful about how someone would feel during that role play. So we know when it comes to sexuality education, of all the different intelligences, here's what tends to happen. We tend to teach to how we learn best. And we know it's really important for us to choose a variety of strategies, knowing that in any given classroom, we've got students that are likely representing all these different kinds of intelligences. So I hope this has been a helpful review for you and that you'll think about ways to differentiate your instruction so that you can have the best student centered approaches to when you're teaching sexuality education.